Previously, a drone at the front was considered a luxury, a pair of eyes that could spy on the enemy and, if you were very lucky, drop a single grenade. Now it is the main executioner of the Russian army.
In the current landscape of modern warfare, drones have come to completely dominate the battlefield in virtually all operational areas and in every domain: land, sea, and air.
For decades, the Kremlin built thousands of tanks for parades and prepared flags for the map of Kyiv. Instead, they got a technological hell where iron scrap worth millions of dollars burns up without ever even seeing the Ukrainian trenches.
Weapons on the battlefield, about the use of artillery, aircraft, cabs and rocket artillery, means of destruction, that is missile weaponry. And we are trying to develop everything comprehensively so that at the doctrinal level we can constantly defeat the Russians.
Today we will show how our drone operators are burning out enemy positions live. We will explain why 40 kilometers from the front line has become a mass grave for Russian equipment even before the battle, and we will calculate how many billions this has already cost the Kremlin. We will also analyze why Britain is now copying this tactic, why Hezbollah has already adopted it, and who is actually learning from whom in this war. Subscribe and hit the like button. Let's get started. Drones have managed to change beyond recognition in just a few years. And we're not talking about design or appearance now, but about how deep into the enemy's rear they are now able to penetrate.
The range is constantly increasing. If we look back just 2 short years ago, the operational range was, well, only about 3 or 5 kilometers. However, now, speaking specifically about these advanced FPV drones, that distance has already reached 40, 50, and sometimes even more than that.
In other words, the front line as a physical barrier for unmanned aviation has essentially disappeared. The enemy's rear has come under fire, just like the front line. And this is no longer just the occasional successful sortie by individual inventors, but systematic solutions that the state is deliberately scaling up to the level of serious combat units.
We are increasing the drone component in some regiments. Battalions of unmanned systems have already been transformed into regiments, which significantly increases our capabilities.
In other words, we are no longer talking about a modest special unit attached to headquarters, but about fully fledged regiments of unmanned systems. And as the Commander-in-Chief emphasizes, this is not some elite experiment for a select few units, but a comprehensive strategy for the entire military.
In general, we are significantly developing the drone component in all units.
And here it's worth pausing to see how this strategy works in real life, not just in official reports. Let's move to a specific section of the front just a few weeks ago. On June 12th, the Russians decided to prepare another gift for the so-called Russia Day. The Kremlin's logic is standard. At any cost, stage a loud victory for a significant date to fill federal TV channels with beautiful footage. That's why near Sloviansk, the occupiers launched a massive offensive with 2 columns at once: infantry on motorcycles, heavy armored vehicles, and even tanks. They scraped together everything they had at hand. They were counting on a beautiful, triumphant report, but the reality turned out to be completely different. Paratroopers from the 81st Separate Airmobile Brigade wiped out both enemy columns even before they reached the first line of defense. Not a single Russian assault group managed to even crawl to the forward edge of the Ukrainian trenches. 2 days of unsuccessful assaults ended in a rout for the enemy, one that Kremlin propagandists will definitely not show their audience. The main role in this defensive operation was played by the drone operators of the Apache Battalion of the 81st Brigade, who not only repel attacks at close range, but systematically destroy enemy reserves and supply lines deep behind enemy lines. Journalists have produced an extensive report about this battle, and we will show it in full without any edits, so that you can see with your own eyes what this war of nerves and technology looks like from the inside.
Sevyerodonetsk. Now we're going out on a free hunt.
Pilot Stas is preparing to launch his middle strike drone into the sky. This is a drone capable of seeing up to 100 kilometers from its launch point and striking a target. The warriors of the Apache unit from the 81st Slobozhanska Air Assault Brigade have modified the drone, and now it can strike the enemy where they least expect it, deep in their rear.
Their morale plays an incredibly vital and significant role in this situation, because before they used to maneuver and move around exactly as they pleased without any restrictions. But now they can no longer move so freely, and their logistical supply chains are already starting to suffer quite a bit because of this.
The drone crosses the line of contact and heads directly toward the outskirts of temporarily occupied Sevyerodonetsk. The camera captures the movement of an occupier.
Come on, let's hit him right there.
That was an enemy checkpoint. And this is what a logistical lockdown for the Russians looks like, which now prevails along the front line.
We flew deep behind the front line, approximately 60 kilometers, with the aim of cutting off the enemy's supply routes. But on the way, we encountered an enemy checkpoint and delivered a fire strike.
This is already the second significant target today, say the Apache pilots. In the morning, they hit armored vehicles that the enemy was trying to hide in a hangar.
This is Siversk, an IFV.
This is what Siversk looks like now.
Yes. So that's a good hit.
These are the same pilots who repelled the first mechanized assault of the year near Sloviansk.
Such a massive attack hadn't been used in the Sloviansk direction before. This was the first one, the way they're used to doing it, usually on their big holidays. That day was their state holiday, but we ruined their plans.
100 enemy infantrymen, which is almost a company. And also 28 motorcycles, several pieces of heavy equipment, including a tank. This column was assaulting the positions of the 81st Brigade from two directions.
The first motorcycle was hit by the way by artillery. It completely stopped the entire column.
At that time, the occupiers were trying to reach the village of Rai Oleksandrivka, which is considered one of the strategic points in the Sloviansk direction, since the road to the Siversky Donets River passes through it, and from there is an opportunity to create a bridgehead for an offensive on Sloviansk.
Those enemies didn't even manage to reach our zero line at all. We stopped them on the approaches, so there are no prisoners. Everything was destroyed.
Currently, there is information that the enemy is preparing another assault, and the Russians are gradually bringing in equipment for it. That is why the UAV pilots are working non-stop and are successfully burning it up, before this equipment turns into columns moving toward Ukrainian positions.
Good afternoon, 1+1.
While the soldier at the position sets up another drone for takeoff, pilot Stas establishes communication with him from kilometers away from the UAV's launch point. This is what remote battlefield control looks like in practice, when pilots are located far from the front line. But this does not affect the effectiveness of their work. The current stage of technological warfare, which now prevails at the front, allows pilots who destroy Russian logistics to sit in these comfortable, almost office-like rooms. This is the Apache unit, the unmanned systems battalion of the 81st Brigade, one of the top units in terms of striking the enemy. This is how it all works in practice. A pilot with a remote control sitting in a dugout tens of kilometers from the front line can see enemy movements more clearly than Russian commanders can see their own units. And while one particular brigade is so confidently cutting off the occupiers' logistics in its sector, on a national scale this results in colossal numbers that Moscow stubbornly tries to ignore. In just 1 year, from June 2025 to May 2026, Ukrainian drones struck more than 1.2 million enemy targets, and the total financial losses for Russia reached an astronomical $40 billion. The most astonishing thing is that this result is achieved by a component of the army that makes up only 2.5% of the total number of the armed forces of Ukraine. In other words, the smallest unit in terms of personnel is inflicting perhaps the greatest losses on the enemy, while the traditional branches of the military, infantry, artillery, and aviation are having to give up their former leadership in favor of technology. This raises a perfectly logical question. Why doesn't Russia do exactly the same? After all, they have their own dangerous developments like the Lancets, Cubes, or Molnias, which have quite serious technical specifications. The answer is rather humiliating for a country that still calls itself the second army in the world. Their industry is simply incapable of handling such a scale of production. While Ukraine is ramping up and planning to produce a record 7 million of its own drones by the end of 2026, most of which are strike tactical FPVs, the Kremlin is forced to invent complex schemes, circumvent tough sanctions through third countries, and disguise the shortage of parts as scheduled technical maintenance at factories. When a vast empire wages war thanks to smuggled microchips, it is the best illustration of the real state of the Russian defense industrial complex. And here we come to the most paradoxical moment of this story. After all, what once began as pure Ukrainian improvisation, ordinary garages, soldering irons, and the wild enthusiasm of people simply trying to survive and defend their land is now being meticulously analyzed in the general staffs of leading nations. The very same nations that just a few years ago were teaching Ukrainians the basics of military rules. The United Kingdom has already officially announced a large-scale reform of its armed forces, basing it specifically on our experience. The British are adopting a key philosophy: inexpensive systems should destroy expensive targets, and the path from developing technology to its appearance on the battlefield should take weeks, not years. They are aiming for a target of 200,000 drones per month. That is exactly how many the armed forces of Ukraine are currently using, and they have already allocated £5 billion for this program. A senior analyst at the British Russia Center made a witty remark about this. If in 2022 London was training Ukrainian soldiers to fight, now everything has turned upside down. Ukraine is now clearly showing Britain what a modern military conflict looks like. And this trend has been picked up not only by Europeans. Even in the Middle East, the Hezbollah group is actively copying tactical techniques invented in Ukrainian trenches and is now using fiber-optic FPV drones against Israel, technology that cannot be jammed by any electronic warfare means. It turns out that unconventional engineering solutions, born out of acute resource shortages in Ukrainian dugouts, are now simultaneously changing military science on different continents and in completely dissimilar conflicts. We are presented with a remarkable picture. Russia began this invasion with the largest fleet of armored vehicles in Europe, strategic aviation, and nuclear threats. All that hardware the Kremlin had boasted about for decades during parades. However, what stopped this onslaught was not equally massive tank armadas in response, but small gadgets costing a few $100s, which, before this war, no serious military theorist even considered as weapons. How much time do you think Russia will need to even come close to the Ukrainian level in this drone race? And will it even manage to do so at all? Write your answer in the comments and also like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode. See you next time!